and actually did a film called When She Was Bad. I played a woman who abuses her child because nobody was talking about the issue. So,
what if the biggest battle on one of television's most iconic shows wasn't on screen, but silently brewing behind the scenes? Millions tuned in for the glamour, the action, the angels, but what they never saw was a quiet war tearing two stars apart. Before she became a household name, Cheryl Ladd's journey to stardom was far from glamorous. Long before joining one of television's most iconic shows, Charlie's Angels, Cheryl struggled to find her place in Hollywood. She began her career not as an actress, but as a singer, lending her voice to animated characters like Melody and Josie and the Pussycats during the early 1970s. It paid the bills, but didn't offer much in terms of fame or satisfaction. Her early career was defined by modest roles, guest appearances, and low-budget projects. Despite her talent and appearance, Cheryl found herself repeatedly overlooked for bigger opportunities, and those closest to her said she was on the verge of giving up when everything suddenly changed. The phone call that would change Cheryl's life came from Charlie's Angels. The show had skyrocketed in popularity, thanks in large part to Farrah Fawcett's charm and appeal. But after just one season, Farrah chose to leave the series. Her departure sent the producers scrambling to keep the show afloat. Replacing a breakout star like Farrah was a tremendous risk, but they believed Cheryl could pull it off. Rather than recasting the same character, Cheryl would step in as Farrah's younger sister, a move designed to maintain narrative continuity and hopefully win over fans. One cast member in particular made things especially difficult: Kate Jackson, known as a serious angel. Kate had a strong creative influence on the series and cared deeply about its tone and content. According to multiple reports, Kate wasn't pleased with Cheryl's arrival and made little effort to hide it. Rumors began circulating that Kate referred to Cheryl as a blonde Barbie doll, reducing her to a stereotype rather than seeing her as a talented co-star. At first, Cheryl tried to break the ice, engaging in conversation, showing up prepared, and remaining professional under pressure. But it didn't matter how polite or punctual she was. Kate's treatment of her remained icy. On set, Kate allegedly ignored Cheryl during rehearsals, refused eye contact at table reads, and interrupted her when she spoke. The crew took note, and the environment soon mirrored Kate's chilly demeanor. Cheryl often found herself sitting alone during breaks while her co-stars huddled together, and over time, the isolation took its toll. Jacqueline Smith, the third angel, tried to keep the peace. She was friendly with both women, but even she couldn't ignore the tension when Cheryl and Kate were in the same room. Cheryl eventually stopped trying to force a connection and instead focused solely on her work. She continued to show up, learn her lines, and perform to the best of her ability. But beneath the surface, frustration and sadness were growing. The show's success was visible to viewers, but internally, Cheryl felt like she was barely holding things together. The tipping point came during production of a particularly challenging episode. The script had undergone several rewrites, and producers had expanded Cheryl's role to include a more emotional arc. For Cheryl, it was an opportunity to prove her acting range. But to Kate, it felt like a personal slight. Reports from the set indicated that Kate was furious about the changes and stormed off in anger. Later that day, she confronted Cheryl in a dressing room. Though no one knows exactly what was said, nearby crew heard yelling, followed by a door slamming. When Cheryl emerged, she was visibly upset and left the set early, a first for her. Following that explosive confrontation, efforts were made by producers to mediate and mend the situation, but Cheryl had made her decision. She was done trying to appease someone who clearly didn't want peace. From that day forward, Cheryl limited her interactions with Kate to scenes that required them to speak. Off camera, she avoided her entirely. The atmosphere on set shifted again, but this time, the frostiness was impossible to ignore. Though the show continued to perform well, the dynamic between Cheryl and Kate was broken. The two women barely spoke, even while filming scenes together. They traveled to events in separate cars and were seated apart at press engagements. From the outside, everything seemed fine, but insiders knew the relationship had disintegrated. Cheryl made it clear she would finish her contractual obligations, but she had no interest in mending things with Kate. She would remain civil for the cameras. But behind them, the line had been drawn. Even after the show ended, Cheryl's silence was deafening. She never trashed Kate publicly or spoke ill of her in interviews. But her refusal to attend reunions, photo shoots, or retrospectives where Kate was present made it clear she had not, and would not, move past what had happened. Over the years, fans noticed her absence at several Charlie's Angels events. When questioned, her representatives blamed scheduling conflicts, but those close to the situation knew the truth. Cheryl would not be part of anything that included Kate. In the early 2000s, Cheryl participated in a career retrospective. When asked if she kept in touch with her former co-stars, she warmly mentioned Jaclyn Smith. Then came the question about Kate Jackson. Her response was short and powerful. No, just that. No elaboration. No sugarcoating. That single word confirmed what many had suspected for years. The rift was real, and it remained unresolved. Cheryl's continued composure only added to the mystery. She never gave interviews venting about her time on Charlie's Angels, but she also never pretended everything was fine. Her silence was not passive. It was purposeful. She refused to rehash the past, but she also refused to lie about it. For many fans, that quiet defiance earned her even more respect. As the years went on, bits and pieces of Kate Jackson's side began to surface. While Cheryl handled the fallout with grace, Kate mostly avoided talking about the show altogether. In one rare interview from the late 90s, when asked if she stayed in touch with her castmates, she laughed and simply said, "No, I've moved on." The response was flippant and only fueled more speculation. People close to Kate have suggested that her time on Charlie's Angels was more complicated than fans realized. She was reportedly dealing with serious health issues, including a diagnosis that would lead to multiple surgeries. Additionally, she was growing increasingly frustrated with the show's creative direction. Kate had always wanted more substance from the series, more character depth and dramatic storytelling. As the series leaned harder into glamour and spectacle, she felt alienated. It's possible that Cheryl's arrival symbolized everything Kate was struggling against, even if it wasn't fair to take that frustration out on her. Still, none of this changed the fact that Kate never attempted to make peace. She never publicly addressed the tension, never issued an apology, and never made any gestures toward reconciliation. For Cheryl, that lack of acknowledgement may have been the final nail in the coffin. She moved on not in bitterness, but in self-preservation. She had no interest in reopening wounds that had never healed. Despite the drama, Cheryl Ladd went on to enjoy a rich and fulfilling career. She starred in numerous television movies, recorded albums, wrote books, and built a meaningful personal life. She married, raised a family, and maintained a lasting friendship with Jaclyn Smith. Her poise and professionalism earned her admiration, even from those who never fully knew the story behind the scenes. Over time, Cheryl's refusal to fake reconciliation became a quiet but powerful statement. She believed in grace and forgiveness, but also in boundaries. She chose peace, not by making amends, but by walking away from a toxic situation and never returning. In Hollywood, where personal feuds are often spun into publicity, Cheryl's silence spoke volumes. She didn't need a scandal to be heard. Her actions told the story. To this day, fans still wonder what exactly happened between Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson. The full truth may never be known, and both women seem content to leave it that way. Cheryl has chosen to focus on the present, and Kate has long withdrawn from the spotlight. But the fallout from their fractured relationship remains one of the most enduring and quietly heartbreaking stories in television history. Sometimes, the biggest betrayals don't happen in the spotlight. They unfold quietly, in dressing rooms, over cold shoulders and unspoken words. And sometimes, healing doesn't come with apologies or closure. Sometimes, it comes from knowing when to walk away and protect your peace. Cheryl Ladd never turned the feud into a headline. She never played the victim. But by staying silent, standing her ground, and moving forward, she became something even more powerful. An example of quiet strength in a world that often mistakes volume for truth. Before Cheryl Ladd ever set foot on the set of Charlie's Angels, her Hollywood journey was filled with hardship, patience, and quiet persistence. Born Cheryl Jean Stoppelmore in South Dakota, she didn't have a famous last name, industry connections, or immediate access to fame. She built her career from the ground up, starting in the early 1970s by singing jingles and doing voice work for cartoons. One of her earliest lesser-known credits was providing the singing voice of Melody in the animated series Josie and the Pussycats. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept her in the game. Her path was slow and winding, marked by auditions, guest roles on television shows, and the kind of jobs that rarely make headlines but offer actors a chance to keep believing. Hollywood has never been kind to those who wait too long. Cheryl knew that time wasn't on her side. In an industry where youth and visibility often outweigh talent and work ethic, she felt the ticking clock with each year that passed. And just when it seemed like she might never get her break, fate intervened in the form of a casting call from Charlie's Angels. At the time, Charlie's Angels was a cultural phenomenon. With its mix of action, fashion, and female-led storytelling, it had captivated American audiences. Farrah Fawcett was at the heart of the show's early success, her face plastered across posters, magazine covers, and every teenage boy's bedroom wall. But after just one season, Farrah made the shocking decision to walk away from the series. The producers, panicked and desperate to sustain the ratings, began looking for a replacement who could maintain the show's momentum without trying to be Farrah 2.0. Their solution was strategic. Instead of replacing her character outright, they would introduce her younger sister, Chris Monroe, played by Cheryl Ladd. What Cheryl couldn't have anticipated was the internal tension that awaited her behind the scenes. From the moment she arrived on set, the atmosphere was icy. There was no celebratory welcome, no warm camaraderie. Instead, she was met with polite distance and professional coldness, especially from one castmate, Kate Jackson. Kate, known as the grounded, serious Angel, had been instrumental in shaping the tone of the show. She was widely respected for her acting chops and creative insight, often consulting with writers and pushing for more substantive plots. She didn't just act, she influenced. And when Cheryl entered the picture, something in that dynamic began to shift. At first, the tension was almost imperceptible. Averted eyes, brisk nods, rushed exits from group conversations. But as the days turned into weeks, the pattern became clear. Cheryl was being excluded, and Kate was the central force behind it. Rumors soon spread that Kate had opposed Cheryl's casting from the beginning, reportedly believing she was selected for her looks rather than her acting skill. Some crew members recall overhearing Kate refer to Cheryl dismissively, likening her to a Barbie doll, a biting reference to the stereotype of blonde actresses being more ornamental than talented. For Cheryl, who had spent years working toward a break like this, those words and that energy were devastating. She had come to the set eager to prove herself, not to replace anyone, and certainly not to become a lightning rod for resentment. She kept her head down, showed up on time, stayed prepared, and treated everyone with kindness. But no matter how many smiles she gave or how diligently she worked, she remained on the outside. Even more difficult was how that alienation began to ripple through the crew. Sets often mirror their stars, and when a dominant personality like Kate set a tone of exclusion, others followed. Cheryl found herself eating lunch alone, watching from the sidelines as Kate and Jacqueline Smith shared easy conversation. Attempts at friendship were met with politeness, but never warmth. And over time, Cheryl stopped trying. The tipping point came during the production of a complex episode that demanded more emotional weight from Cheryl's character. After multiple script rewrites, Cheryl was given additional scenes that gave her more screen time and deeper material. She was thrilled. It was an opportunity to be seen as more than just a new blonde. But Kate saw it as something else entirely, a shift in power. To Kate, it appeared the producers were recentering the show around Cheryl. Perhaps it tapped into fears she had long harbored, that Charlie's Angels was sliding into style over substance. Whatever the reasons, her frustration boiled over. When the revised script was distributed, Kate reportedly slammed it down and left the set. What followed was a private confrontation in Cheryl's dressing room, the contents of which remain a mystery to this day. But crew members nearby reported hearing loud voices, a door slamming, and moments later, Cheryl emerging visibly shaken and retreating from the set for the rest of the day. It was the first and only time she ever walked off. Afterward, producers attempted to mediate. Apologies were floated. Meetings were arranged. But Cheryl made her decision. There would be no more attempts at reconciliation. From that point forward, she kept her interaction with Kate strictly professional. They would film scenes together, smile during press shoots, and appear as a united front to fans. But off camera, their relationship had frozen entirely. The silence between them became a fixture of the set. No casual banter, no shared jokes, no warmth. Promotional events required meticulous planning to ensure the two weren't seated together. Cheryl began opting out of photo shoots and reunions. In public, she stayed composed and focused on her work. Privately, she withdrew from anything that required her to share space with Kate. As time went on, Cheryl built an impressive career beyond Charlie's Angels. She starred in television movies, released music albums, and authored books. She got married, raised a family, and continued working the industry with a reputation for grace and professionalism. She remained close with Jaclyn Smith, appearing with her at events and in interviews. But the distance between her and Kate Jackson never closed. Not once. In interviews over the years, Cheryl was asked, often pointedly, about her relationship with her co-stars. She always spoke warmly of Jaclyn. When it came to Kate, she offered only one-word answers or changed the subject. In one particularly memorable moment during a retrospective, she was asked directly whether she stayed in touch with Kate. Her answer, "No." The word hung heavy in the air, final and unambiguous. That answer confirmed what fans had long suspected. Whatever had happened between them on that set had never been healed, and Cheryl had no interest in pretending otherwise. Her refusal to join public reunions or participate in tributes involving Kate wasn't pettiness. It was principle. She refused to rewrite history with false smiles and empty gestures. Her silence became her form of protest, her quiet truth. On the other hand, Kate Jackson responded to the feud with a different kind of silence. She rarely gave interviews at all, and even more rarely spoke about Charlie's Angels. Over time, she faded from the spotlight almost entirely. Those close to her have revealed that her experience on the show was more painful than many realized. During its run, she dealt with serious personal issues, including significant health problems that required surgeries and long recovery periods. She was also deeply frustrated with the show's direction, feeling it had abandoned its original tone in favor of glossy visuals and merchandising. Some believe that these internal battles led her to lash out at those around her, including Cheryl. That perhaps her animosity wasn't truly personal, but a symptom of her burnout, fear, and physical suffering. It doesn't excuse her behavior, but it adds context. Still, the fact remains, Kate never apologized, never reached out, never acknowledged the pain that was caused. Not publicly, not privately, not ever. And for Cheryl, that silence was louder than any tabloid headline. It was a confirmation that the bridge between them hadn't just collapsed, it had been intentionally burned. As decades passed, Charlie's Angels remained a pop culture touchstone. Fans rewatched episodes, analyzed interviews, and dissected body language. The chemistry between the Angels always looked seamless on screen. But now, with more context, viewers began seeing the cracks. Subtle glances, awkward spacing, unacknowledged dialogue. The tension that once simmered beneath the surface became glaring in hindsight. When Cheryl spoke publicly about forgiveness in later years, her words were always thoughtful. She said she believed in grace and the power of moving on, but she also stressed the importance of protecting one's peace. Sometimes, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. Sometimes, it means walking away and never opening that door again. That is exactly what Cheryl did. She walked away. She didn't go on talk shows to air grievances or write tell-all books. She let her actions speak. And in a town like Hollywood, where drama sells and pain is often monetized, that silence was powerful. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already proven it by surviving and thriving on her own terms. Kate Jackson, meanwhile, remains mostly out of the public eye. Her story, though still admired by many, is marked by a sense of unfinished business. While Cheryl chose dignity and distance, Kate chose withdrawal and silence of another kind. And perhaps that silence is her own burden, her own form of regret. In the end, the feud between Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson was never about one fight or one insult. It was about a deeper fracture of respect, trust, and inclusion that never healed. It wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a quiet realization that not every wound needs words, and not every conflict needs closure. For Cheryl, moving on meant never pretending things were fine when they weren't. It meant holding her head high, choosing her peace, and building a life beyond the shadows of that set. If this left you thinking, feeling, or remembering the golden age of TV a little differently, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's most iconic eras. We've got some powerful ones coming up.